All right, y'all go ahead and do the factoring and the math knowledge question for today. Pause the video, and then once everyone is finished, you can unpause the video, and I'll show you the correct answers. So for this factoring, you're going to start off by removing an x squared, because that's the greatest common factor. And so then we're going to do a remove, replace, reduce, but don't forget to replace your 2 whenever you actually factor it. And we're going to use, this would be a 12, so we're going to use a 12 and a 1. Now that first factor will actually reduce by 2. And so this would be your answer for your factoring question. For the math knowledge question, you will learn how to do this way more quickly in calculus using derivatives and maximizing and minimizing. But basically what you want to do is plug in all the numbers. And so if you plug in 150, you should get negative that number, 122,500. If you plug in 200, you should get negative 120,000. If you plug in 300, you should get negative 100,000. If you plug in 350, you should get negative 82500. And then if you plug in 500, you get 0. And so what is the smallest number of items that must be made and sold in order for the company not to lose money on the production run? Well, if you look, the P is the profit, and if you sell 150, 250, 300, or 350, you end up making a profit of a negative amount of money, which is meaning that you do not make money, you lost money. So we have to sell at least 500 to break even, because that's what we means when we get a 0. We didn't make any money, but we didn't lose any money. So 500 would be your answer there, E. So we're looking at lesson 108. We did lesson 106 whenever we did lesson 78, dealing with conics and ellipses that have been shifted and hyperbolas that have been shifted from the origin. And then for lesson 107, that is dealing with geometric series. And so I told you we were going to skip all of those this year. So now we're going to be looking at lesson 108. We're dealing with matrix addition and multiplication. So hopefully you'll understand matrix addition and matrix multiplication after this lesson. So we want to simplify this. These are actually pretty straightforward. If you would like to read about matrix addition and multiplication, you can read on page 603, 604, 605, 606. They give some examples, and they give you a lot of words in there, but it does help you if you're a little bit confused. But on this one, we are just wanting to actually subtract. So to subtract these, they do have to be the same size, or to add, they have to be the same size. So we are going to literally do 4 minus 3. And that's going to go in the top left. And then we're going to do 2 minus 5. Negative 3. Negative 2 minus a negative 4 is negative 2 plus 4, so 2. And that'd be your first row. For the next one, we have 6 minus 4, so 2. 3 minus negative 2, 5. And then 5 minus 6, negative 1. And that would be your answer. Okay? That is literally what you do. You add the terms that are in the same spot, or you subtract the terms that are in the same spot. Now, they don't give an example for this but then they ask you to do it in your homework. They give you a matrix, and they say this is what your matrix A is, and what is 2A? Well, on this, all you do is multiply each part by 2. And so that would be your new matrix 2A. You literally would just multiply each element in your matrix by whatever number is out front. Okay, so now we're going to look at multiplying. When we are multiplying, we first have to make sure that we can even multiply the matrices, because you can't multiply all matrices together. This first matrix is a 3 by 2. Remember, you have 3 rows and 2 columns. And then the second one is a 2 by 2. You can only multiply them if these two numbers are the same. So if this was a 3 by 2 and a 3 by 3, we would not be able to multiply them together because these inside numbers have to be the same. And then the outside numbers, that's going to be your answer. Our answer is going to end up being a 3 by 2. Okay? So you do want to copy down what's written down on the right side of the board, and you probably want to leave a little bit of space there because we're going to fill in some stuff in that. So what we're going to do is we have to multiply and add some stuff. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. So we're going to look at this first row and the first column to figure out what goes in this box here. And so the way that you do that, you take the 1 and the 7 and you multiply them together. And then you add the 2 times the 9. Okay? So that's what you do for the first entry in your answer. For the next one, to the right, we're going to do 1 and 2 and the next row. So we're going to have 1 times 8 and then plus 2 times negative 2. So that's for that second entry. Now going to the next element on the next row, we're going to go to the second row. And for this box here, we're going to use the first column. So we're going to have 3 times 7 and then plus 4 times 9. And then for that number in the next slot, we're going to use the second row. So we're going to have 3 times 8 and then 4 times negative 2. We're going to add those together. Okay. Now for that last row, we're going to use the bottom row. And for this element here, we're going to use the first row. So we're going to have 5 times 7 plus 6 times 9. And then for the bottom right number, we're going to have the second row we used. The second column, I'm sorry. So we're going to have 5 times 8 plus 6 times negative 2. And so now all you have to do is simplify that to get your final answer. So this is 7 plus 18 here, which is 25. We have 21 plus 36, which is 57. We have 35 plus 54, which would be 89. We have 8 plus negative 4, which is 4. We have 24 plus negative 8, which is 16. Then we have 40 plus negative 12, which is 28. And so that would be your answer there. Okay, so if y'all need, you can go back and re-watch that example again. But that's basically how you would multiply 2 matrices together. So now we're going to look at an example. And it's again a 3 by 2 times a 2 by 2. So we can multiply those two together. So I'm going to say 2 times 1, which is 2, and then plus negative 3 times 4, which is negative 12. And if it helps you to kind of space them out so that your numbers don't bleed together too much, that's fine. You may not want to draw the boxes, but you can kind of split it into sections. For this top right number, we're going to do 2 times 2, which is 4, plus 15, because we have negative 3 times negative 5. Now we're going to go to the next row. We're going to do 3 times 1, plus 1 times 4. For the next element, we're going to do 3 times 2, plus 1 times negative 5. Okay. And then for our last one, we're going to do 4 times 1, plus 5 times 4. And then we're going to have 4 times 2, plus 5 times negative 5. And then the last thing we need to do is just add or subtract our numbers. So our first element is going to be negative 10. And then we're going to have 19, 7, 1, 24, and then negative 17. So this would be our answer here. So once you get how the pattern works, these aren't terrible, but it is easy to make a mistake because you're adding and subtracting and multiplying, numbers that you don't think you need help with or anything like that, but sometimes you do make a careless mistake on. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you're very careful when you're multiplying, adding, and subtracting here. So we're going to look at one more, but this time it's going to be a 3 by 3. You can always multiply the same size by the same square matrix by the same size square matrix. A 3 by 3 times a 3 by 3 is going to result in a 3 by 3 for your answer. Okay, so we're going to use the same concept on these. However, we are going to end up multiplying a little bit more because we've got more terms to deal with, more elements. So we're going to start with the first row and the first column. And so we would have 0, because we have 1 times 0, and then we would have negative 1, and then we would have 0 here. So I'm going to split it up into my 9 parts, but this first term is just going to have a negative 1, because all we had was the 1 times the negative 1 left over. Okay, all of the other 2 became a 0. Now we're going to do the first row by the second column. So we're going to have a 0 plus a 0 plus a 2. So now we go to the third column. We have a 0, we have a negative 2, and we have a positive 6. Okay? So that means we're finished with our first row now. At this point, we're going to go to our second row and our first column. So we're going to have negative 1, and then we have 0 and 0. So we just have a negative 1 there. Now we go to the second column. We have 0, 0, and negative 2. And now we go to the last column. We have negative 1, 0, and plus a negative 6. Okay? Now we're going to go to our last row. And we're going to use the first column here. So I have 3 and negative 4, and then I have a 0. Then when I go to the next column, I have 0, 0, 0. And then I'm going to go to the last column. I'm going to have 3, negative 8, and then 0. And so now all I need to do is to add or subtract my numbers for each element. And so that would be your answer. This 3x3 matrix here. So again, you may want to rewatch that video. You can look in the book and see how they explain how to do it. They use subscripts and stuff for theirs. So if that helps you, you can look there. But that's basically all you do for matrix addition and multiplication. On your homework, you do get to omit number 9, 14, and 19A. Now for 19B, you do need to do it. You don't develop the identity. You're just going to need to go back in your notes and find that one, and then plug in the values for your x and y that they give you. So your x would be 165 and your y would be 75. Okay? So make sure you do your homework tonight so that we can go over any questions you have